Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, brothers and sisters, colleagues, fellow advocates for African unity. It is both an honor and a profound responsibility to welcome you to this critical discussion on the harmonization of economic policies, a cornerstone of Africa's liberation and prosperity. Brothers and sisters, we gather not just as individuals, but as torch bearers of a vision that giants like Kwame Nkrumah, Thomas Sankara, and Wangari Maathai fought for, an Africa united, self-reliant, and sovereign. So we confront a pivotal question. How can we dismantle the economic borders colonialism imposed and build a future where Africa's 1.4 billion people thrive together? The answer lies in harmonizing our trade, currency, taxation, and infrastructure policies, not as fragmented states, but as a single unstoppable force. The African Continental Free Trade Area has already set the stage. Now we can push further. How do we accelerate a common currency while learning from the ECO's delays? How can we align industrial policies to avoid competition and foster collaboration? What bold steps must leaders and citizens take to turn unity from rhetoric to reality? Let's be clear. The path is not without obstacles. Some fear losing sovereignty. Others worry about unequal benefits. But history teaches us that Africa's strength has always been in collective action. That's how we defeated colonialism to launching the African Free Trade Continental Area. The stakes are too high to let short-term fears block long-term liberation. So today is not just for listening, brothers and sisters. It's for thinking, challenging, and committing. So I'm inviting you, or we are inviting you, CSG is inviting you, the ancestors are inviting you, the Anunnaki are inviting you to share bold ideas. Example, should Africa adopt a digital currency to leapfrog monetary barriers? Question assumptions. For example, is national interest delaying continental progress? And then would like you also to pledge action. What will you do personally out of this meeting? For example, you can say, I will lobby my Chamber of Commerce to prioritize the African Free Trade Continental Area compliance. So as Nkrumah warned, we must unite now or perish. So let this meeting be a spark that ignites action in our governments, businesses, and communities. Even those who may not be here, when they watch this or share this, can be so ignited. Brothers and sisters, forward ever, backwards never. So let us begin. So this is me welcoming you all. There are only 4 of us at the moment in the meeting, but as you know, this goes out to the world as we record it. So I'm happy to initiate the discussion, and then we can all then come in. So harmonizing economic policies. What are the key policies that we need to harmonize? So One is the common monetary policy that we need to accelerate. So I'm just checking that those who have into the waiting room have joined. We need to accelerate the ECO, which is the ECOWAS and African Monetary Union plans to reduce currency instability and boost intra-African trade. We also need to harmonize trade liberalization, which means that we fully implement the African Continental Free Trade Area by eliminating non-tariff barriers and simplifying cross-border commerce. Brother Pigeon, I believe, has been doing some work on the question of the African Free Trade area. Then the other key area is industrial coordination. That there's a need to develop regional value chains. Example, an East African automotive hubs, West African agro-processing zones to avoid duplication and maximize efficiency. And then the other area is tax harmonization. This is to align corporate tax policies to combat profit shifting and attract ethical foreign investment. Infrastructure integration to fast-track the Trans-African Highway Network and the African Single Electricity Market to connect markets and lower business costs. So those are the 5 critical areas where we need to harmonize. So currency, trade, in industry, tax, and infrastructure. For instance, the Nigerian Federal Tax Authority knows in and out all the rich, if you like, the rich men and women in Nigeria, for instance. So they know them all. Not only do they know them, they know where their incomes come from, because they are the tax body, the federal tax body. They know, for instance, how much tax they pay and whether they are underpaying or overpaying tax. So the Nigerian Federal Tax Authority, this is just an example, has this information. If you go to Azania, South Africa, again, the South African tax body would have all this information. So if a president is hiding money, cash in their house, they have this information. The Ghanaian tax authorities also have this tax information. Those companies or corporate bodies or MNCs that are on the continent, again, they have this information. So we have the information. So harmonizing tax across the continent will mean that the individual neo-colonial territorial tax authorities will come together and come up with a continental strategy for taxation. And what that will mean is that continent as a whole will have a better system for the paying of tax. Currently, as you know, not a lot of tax is being paid. A lot of money is siphoned out of the system, and it is not because the authorities are ignorant, but it appears that the neo-colonial system itself is complicit. So clearly, what I am saying is that there are challenges that we need to overcome. Apart from the fact that harmonization itself faces hurdles like sovereignty concerns. So if you are a president and your remit is to steal and to be part of the looting machine, you're only interested in your family and so on, or your nationality, you're not interested in the welfare of the people as a whole, then you will be concerned when we talk about a united Africa. because then you'll be concerned that you will lose your sovereignty. But then there are other challenges, which is uneven development. If we harmonize economic policies, what will that mean for various parts of the continent? Will some parts of the continent develop more? In other words, will they attract more capital, more human labor? Will they attract more investors? And will others lose? So there is a concern there. And then there is a question of political resistance. As we know, AES has pulled out of ECOWAS because of the threat by ECOWAS to fight a war on behalf of France, which then raises the question why African nations today are prepared to fight the dirty wars of the former colonial territory, former imperialists. Anyway, these hurdles, sovereignty concerns, uneven development, political resistance, they are there, but they are not insurmountable. We can find solutions to them. For example, why don't we have a phased integration? Why don't we pilot programs like the ECO in select nations before we do a full rollout across, say, West Africa? Why don't we have compensatory funds like the EU's cohesion funds to support weaker economies during the transition? And then some might argue, why don't we have a public-private partnership where we mobilize African multinationals like the Dangote Group, MTN, to champion cross-border projects? So yes, there are challenges, but those challenges can be overcome if the African people are clear as to why they must unite. We are not aware that there is that discussion pervasively across the continent, in the same way as, for instance, before independence. You could hear it on every tongue that we must liberate ourselves, or we must be free of this system. Currently, the neo-colonial system as it is very pervasive. And as we all are aware, even Pan-Africanists who share our dream, or the Nkrumah's dream, or the dream of the Pan-African fathers and mothers, as you know, some of them are happy to say, I am a Ghanaian, and I am a Sierra Leonean, and I am a Libyan, or I am an Egyptian, I am a Ghanaian. We are proud of our citizenship of these neo-colonial territories. In the context of the confusion between who is an African and and the fact that there's no African nation at the moment, so we are conflicting ethnicity and citizenship fundamentally. Apart from all those kind of intellectual and citizenship and so on confusions, there's a need for advocacy from us, because we are meeting every Saturday talking about these things. So we need to do some more advocacy. Then we need to engage Pan-African businesses and infrastructure initiatives. There's a need for engagement, and then there's a need for further debate. How can Africa balance national sovereignty with economic integration? Because the reality now is that Africa is not united. The future is that we want it to unite. So we need to deal with the issues now in terms of the sovereignty now and the harmonization now. If the continent is united, then we won't have to worry about sovereignty and harmonization, because there will be one continental government. And so these arguments will not arise in the form in which they do. So, yeah, so this is an introduction in solidarity with the consensusism study group. So thank you. That's my introductory presentation on the question of the harmonization of economic policies. Let's hear on AES, what is happening in AES, and after we hear from AES, anyone else who wants to do a presentation can do so, and then we'll have a discussion on what we've heard. Brother Raspala, are you ready to share the latest news on the Alliance of Sahelian States? You need to unmute yourself if you are speaking. Thank you.
Give thanks, my elder. Give thanks, blessed, even for the welcoming. Give thanks to everyone who's able to make it tonight. Okay, can I just request that you give me just like 5 minutes to get away from where I am right now? Because there's too much noise in the background. I'll just try to get away, and then I think maybe after 5 minutes, then I'll be able to report.
Yes, that's perfectly okay. Thank you. So whilst we are waiting for Brother Raspala to give us the latest news on the AES, let me ask Brother Pigeon whether he has prepared something on the topic. Brother Pigeon.
Hello, Brother Kwame, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Did you prepare anything on this topic to share with us?
No, I can talk a bit on this, but I'm not an economist anyway.
Well, you don't have to be an economist to you don't have to be an economist. Okay, yeah. So please do share what you would like to share with us.
Thank you, Brother Kwame, and greetings to all of you members. A bit sorry for my lateness. One is that I'm thinking that we need to have, in terms of especially economy and trade, we need to have maybe Africa Trade Organization, like the way we have World Trade Organization. So probably one of the means where we can then unify the economics and trade, the commerce angle of economics is then by maybe coming up with something of equivalent to World Trade Organization, but now for Africa. Because having sat on probably some of the conferences of World Trade Organization, there are various units within the World Trade Organization. For example, there's a unit that deals with what you call trade facilitation. So there's a committee called trade facilitation, which each country have their equivalent committee called trade facilitation. And what this committee does is especially to look at trade issues. So they look at if there are non-tariff barriers or tariff issues that then affect economic, trade, and everything else. So I'm thinking one way to have a unified economic approach, especially in commerce and trade, is probably propose an Africa Trade Organization or Africa Trade Alliance, one unified body in the continent, and then actually come up with a unified policy in terms of economy. Because the economics then extends to various angles, as you said. There are transport issues that will have to affect the opening of markets. And I think I contributed to this last time that even if you open the Africa Trade Continental Area for agreement, we still have a problem in terms of accessing what you call the market because of poor transportation. So transport network is a very important area we have to look at. And again, what you're saying again is the what you call the taxes. Because you see, the tax regimes are actually affecting trade and commerce. Because there are goods that are either, we have a double taxation. Even in the country here, we are still experiencing what you call a double taxation. So traders complain, why am I taxed in Kenya? I'm going to be taxed in Uganda. And maybe you see all those problems that we then call double taxation. So how do then countries agree that either taxation happen on the country of origin or the country of entry? Because that makes trade a bit expensive or economics, especially commerce, a bit expensive due to double taxation. Again, one thing that is very common that we must push very clearly is the harmonization of what we call the monetary angle, the currency. Because I believe that why should Africa still not have a common currency? Why should we be still trading with dollars and in the continent, or changing it to shillings, export, I don't know, in whatever you want to export in? I think it's very important that then we have to ensure that you have a one common currency, and that's what Nkrumah proposed, monetary system. Because when you start from a currency, then you have one trade policy and the other commercial policy, then you can be able to agree on the rest of the things, because that's the key thing we are having as a problem. And I sometimes keep wondering, you see how we are trying to do our trade and commerce with the external world, for example, Europe, or for example, China, or even America. We are not at equal at all. Like we don't enjoy win-win situation. But African continent has some level of average development rate. So it means that we cannot exploit ourselves that much. Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and the rest can still have common currency or common trade without that issues of whether one is exploiting the other or not. But when we trade too much with the outside and look at how we engage with the outside world apart from the continent, there's a lot of restrictions that come in, there's a lot of unfairness, there's a lot of disadvantages that we gain as a continent. And I believe that is item that we need to think on how we actually harmonize our policies. I know in standard level, as I deal a bit with some things like standard technical regulations and what we call conformity assessment procedures, these are things to do with the markets and products. So we have a common standard for products. For example, if somebody wants to export milk from Uganda, so how do we agree that the standards that milk meet in Uganda is an what you call an acceptable standard across the continent, so that a Uganda trader will not take milk to Ghana, and Ghana will subject that milk to another what you call standard check. So there's a lot of effort going on in that area. I'm aware of a lot of effort in that area in terms of having a common standard of goods, because then economics and trade have first of all depend on the common standard of goods, so that when a coffee or cocoa is cleared from Ghana, it doesn't have to go to another check in Kenya for us to trade it. When coffee comes from Kenya, it's clearly cleared to trade anywhere. But when you don't have those common standards, that's why we are doing harmonization of standards. We're also doing a lot of harmonization in technical regulations, a lot of harmonization in what we call conformity assessment procedures. But I believe that then this is the key thing that Africa has to look at, because economics is the basis of a country. But again, I think did Nkrumah say, Brother Kwame, that we seek the economic kingdom first or the political kingdom first? Because there's an element there.
Yeah, yes. In fact, he said we should seek first the political kingdom. Because without political control, you can't implement economic policies. So what you have mentioned are economic policies which have to be implemented. But how do you implement a policy if you're not in office? So if Brother Pigeon was in office, he would, for instance, if he's the president of Kenya, he can call a conference of whatever the presidents of African countries and say, look, we need to harmonize our currencies. So yes, so you have to have the political power first. And the point you make is important, Brother Pigeon, because the whole point of the political liberation movement was so that we will take back control of the political authority on the kingdom, on the continent. That was in the hand of the colonial authorities, so that we as Africans can implement policies that we like. That was the whole point. And then some people have lost the way. They think being president was what this was all about. And then they are happy to steal and kill and so on, on behalf of criminals. So yeah, the point you make is very important. I don't know if you finished, but continue if you haven't.
No, I was towards my end of this. So thank you for bringing that in, because then that gives us the direction towards how do we attain economic policies, harmonization of economic policies. So it means political process is very important to give what you call political goodwill in order to harmonize the policies. Because if you look, for example, if somebody asks you, why has Africa not have a common currency for all those years? Surely, does it mean that we have less experts, economic experts? Does it mean we don't have systems to come up with the currency? What is really lacking? And you then understand what lacks is the political will. So there's a lack of political will. Like look at what now Sahel is coming up with. The Sahel said they want to come with a common currency. Then you realize that if a short period of time, some people with good political will are willing to come up with a currency. The rest of 50, whatever countries in the continent for 60 years are not coming up with a currency. And they all know the advantage of why should we have a currency. They all know why it's very important. But then they want to protect their so-called currencies that are not even controlled in their countries. It's still made printed by De La Rue or printed in somewhere in France or whatever company. So I think then it's very important that, and not only in economics, Brother Kwame, even what we talk about the unification of Africa in terms of the political unification of Africa, even when we talk about common military system in Africa, the political kingdom is very fundamental in order for us to unlock all these things. Because there's nothing that is said that Africans don't have enough expertise, Africa don't have enough technology, Africa don't have anything else that can stop us from having a common military, having a common currency, having a common political government. Basically, we have lack of political interest, and it's because, and that's why I challenge some of many progressive Pan-Africans, that if you think still that politics is not important, then wait and see how we've been going as a continent. It's the politicians that make policies, and those policies are not to the interest of the citizens, but to the interest of neo-colonial masters and their puppets. And therefore, we, the progressive Pan-Africans, must think about how do we then infiltrate that their so-called political system so that we can have any radical Pan-Africans or progressive, even if they become a member of parliament, at least they can go in the parliament and start push for even a bill in terms of why don't you then, like now they are saying, I think Rwanda said that they are opening their country for visa-free. Ghana said visa-free. I think Burkina Faso said visa-free. It means a president just have an executive order to come and say, from today onward, you don't need a visa to come to my country. That's just a pronunciation, which means it is not technically hard for us even to harmonize our policies. It just requires some goodwill. That's what I would say. Thank you.
You hit the nail on the head. It is not hard. You know, it is not. In fact, it's, you know, how come that France is no more in Burkina Faso? Because there was a new political authority that said, look, you need to leave. And the reason Africa is on the continent is not because Africa is so powerful. It's because African politicians want America to protect them in office. That's what it's about. So thank you very much. General, are you ready now to share the AES story, latest on AES? If not, then Brother John Achuka can, because he had his hand up earlier, and then you can share with us the latest. Are you ready now?
Let him share, my elder, and then I'll come after you.
Okay, John. I know you have
yes,
difficulty.
I'm ready.
Yeah, I know you have difficulty with your internet, but yes, please make hay while the sun shines. Carry on.
Okay.
Carry on, John.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, all Alkeblanites, wherever you are. Particularly, this is actually one of the most striking issues that we are really handling, because it determines everything. Whether you are powerful militarily, whatever, as long as the economy does not support you, you are nothing. So as we stand, African tax to GDP ratio is 16%. And this is as per so many sources, OECD, the World Bank, IMF, and so forth and so forth. And what does this tax to GDP ratio mean? It basically means that Africa or African countries cannot finance their development needs. We have social services, health services, to mention but a few. But we do not have the finances from our revenue to finance these needs. And what does it mean? It means that we are forced to look for other routes through which we can secure these finances to finance our development needs. You have seen how of recent we are beginning to wake up. Today you are in IMF. When they attach a condition, you run to China. When China touches a condition, you run to World Bank. So it is a clear indication to me that somehow there is some light in the tunnel, but we need to make things clear. And I think that's what gave birth to the African Continental Free Trade Area. Why is the tax to GDP ratio of Africa as low as 16% compared to the rest of the world? Of course, it is not the lowest. The lowest tax to GDP ratio is in the Middle East. And unfortunately, those in the Middle East are able to finance their development needs because they rely on natural resources. But somebody can ask me, the Middle East and Africa have vast amounts of natural resources. Why are we not measuring up to it? That's another, we shall answer that one later. The low tax to GDP ratio is basically contributed by so many things, but I'll just touch a few. One, the low tax base. When we talk of a low tax base, we are looking at what are some of the avenues through which our governments can get taxes from. They are so narrow. Some of our countries, we still rely on exporting raw materials in crude form. And when you export it in crude form, you again go and import the same product expensively. Now that one runs a whole complex narrative that even sometimes economists just pause and fail to get an answer. The other one, and the one which is most drastic, is what the colonialists did. They went and regrouped and said, okay, let's leave them with the self-rule, but let's come in another language of multinational companies. I have actually seen very few multinational companies which are between Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, South Africa, and so forth. But most of them here, they're headquartered in the New York, the Brussels, whatsoever. These multinational companies have dictated African economies and tax revenue, so much so that through their aggressive tax planning, they have successfully evaded and avoided taxes. For you, most of African countries' financial years are coming to the end on 30th June of this calendar year. And I can assure you that none of them is performing well as per the briefing that they gave in March 2025. Why? Because they are waiting for the multinationals when they are filing their tax return regions. On the 30th, we are waiting for them. So they will give us what they call tax. But why is this issue very important for us who are here today? For an economy to be healthy, my friends, we need all avenues. And multinationals in particular have restricted us to corporate income tax, which they even go behind and hijack our politicians to play with the tax rates. But countries like the European Union, they are doing well because income tax is a measure of how wealthy a country is. You can actually collect tax revenue from every citizen in the country. And that means you are running an corporate income tax. So unless Africa wakes up through on how can we increase on the personal income tax, the corporate income tax, this time around not of aggressive multinationals from our former colonial masters, but multinationals which are actually by Africans. Of course, we are not going to close that. Let's run it as Africans. If they also have capital, we are free to go to do business. Then we need to reduce reliance on tax on goods and services, almost in East Africa, without VAT. Comrade Pigbin will attest to this. Without VAT, our economies are down. VAT is the savior. And then non-tax revenue. And I think somebody touched about Niger here because of uranium. Somebody was saying we can wage that let the regional partners open a war against Niger, but just because of uranium. And this uranium was being exported in raw form. But now somebody is saying, no, can we add value to it? Or else allow us to look for a trading partner who is capable of giving us better returns. So, all that said and done, African Continental Free Trade Area is a game changer and a savior in the future. And it also picks a leaf from what already exists. For example, we have so many regional blocks: the East African Community, South African Development Community, Economic Community of West African States, and now Sahel, although they have not yet recognized Sahel. So we can actually leverage on this and tackle two key issues for us to safely. Can we harmonize the tax barriers? Comrade Pigdin will come and support me later that between Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, there are a lot of tax barriers to date, despite the East African Community single customs territory. For example, Kenya has a value-added tax rate of 18%. So you find that these things distort, the value chain and how our businesses operate. Then secondly, we have a lot of non-tax barriers, political issues, interference. We have, quality issues. I think there is a contentious issue in East Africa of and some cereals, whereby some countries, and this one was brought in because we failed at the beginning. Actually, when the East African Community Single Customs Territory was taking off, we failed to harmonize the quality standard issue. And I'm actually pleased to report that last month, I think the region harmonized on the quotation of quality standards. So for now, I can say that with African Continental Free Trade Area and with the commitment of the political will to address the tariff and non-tariff barriers, our economies can grow as they are projected, that they are going to grow by at least 5%. And are actually achievable if you and me sit down and inform our brother or sister that get what? Can I export cocoa from Ghana to Uganda? The milk in Uganda, has it found markets? In other words, we should find something to sell. But now when we ourselves, we have nothing to any.
Brother John, have you finished? Your line is not very stable. So I don't know if you can hear me. Your line is not very stable, Brother John. Raspala, I think Brother John has finished. Raspala, can you come in, please? Yeah. What's the latest on the AES? Thank you.
Yes, give thanks, my elder. Blessed. Let me just read briefly from what I got so far. Okay, so as we know, the AES, they had founded actually a new African national anthem. So, and then that anthem, they actually started to officialize it, and it is now the official anthem of the three countries joined and forming one nation. And also another thing that they've done is the Alliance States is the Shared Defense Initiative, a joint AES military force of 5,000 troops have been proposed to conduct. I'll come back just now.
Yeah, okay. Whilst we wait for Raspala to come back, can I ask, are we all familiar with why we have to
Okay.
harmonize? Yeah, go on,
All
brother.
right. Yeah, I'm back. Sorry.
Yeah, go on.
I'm just trying to get away because they're having a party here in my family. So I'm just trying to balance now two lives in one at one time. So, okay, so I was saying, so now the AS have formed a collective defense, né? Which is an autonomy from ECOWAS and the former colonial powers. And the AS have economy regionalizations, which includes banking, currency, and resource control. They have institutional solidification, which is via legal, cultural, and political frameworks. 4, they have realignment with non-Western powers, which is Russia, China, Turkey, Iran, and now Chad wants to join the AES and break their borders and form and join the country. So, and then another thing that is happening is the common cultural policy they are institutionalizing between the three countries. So what they're trying to do, they're trying to join their parliaments into one parliament, which is a joint parliament to strengthen the supranational identity. They've also begun in judicial cooperation, creating plans for regional criminal court to tackle terrorism, transnational crime, and human rights abuses. And then AES, this one has happened since February, but I think maybe we should be expecting a flag because they've also officialized a new flag, which will symbolize the new nation, which is the AES. And then obviously on the side of sovereignty, nationalization, and resource policies, we know that they are slowly taking control of their resources by including mining licensing to assert economic independence. And they're also upping their equity stakes in mining operations and rolling out nationalization strategies, of which they are developing. And then most interestingly, and of course, the most interesting part is that in May 2025, they launched a confederal bank for investment and development, which is called VCIDAS. And they launched it with 500 billion CF franc capital to fund regional infrastructure, industrial projects. And then the last interesting one is the one where AES has eliminated roaming fees, introduced a joint passport, a unified customs, and advanced plans for a common currency. And of course, what I just explained, the central bank, which they are actually just launched it with this 500 billion CF franc. So these are the developments so far that are happening in the AES. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, brother, very much for sharing with us the latest on the ES. So the time now is 1 minute past 8. Ras, can you tell us a bit more about the anthem? Do you have any further information?
Give thanks, most honorable. Yes, my yeah, the national anthem. I think I did send it on the CSG group. That national anthem. That national anthem. I think is French, and they did just recently translated into English. But I think also Africans, we need to, if they haven't yet, translated it to Kiswahili. So this national anthem was developed as a anthem of Africa, which is the new Africa. So yeah, basically that's what's happening there. That's why I'm also on this side of South Africa, advocating for talking with the revolutionaries to change their national anthem of the AU into this one of the AES for solidarity. Yes, blessed.
Thank you very much, brother. So here is the anthem as far as I can see. I can collect from YouTube.
Anthem of the Confederation of Sahel States, AES, titled Sahel Bank, is a powerful and symbolic text. Let's break it down in depth, verse by verse and line by line, to understand its deeper meaning and what it represents within the political and historical context of the AES, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and the wider Pan-African vision. The AES was formed as an alliance of sovereign West African nations seeking to free themselves from neo-colonial domination, external military presence, and economic dependency, particularly from France, ECOWAS, the IMF, World Bank, and other Western powers. This anthem captures that revolutionary spirit, invoking pride, resilience, and the aspiration for true African independence. Verse 1. Honoring the past. To the proud people of the Sahel, heirs of mighty African empires, your ancestors once ruled the sands and the rivers. They built kingdoms of gold, wisdom, and culture. Today, you carry their legacy. A new dawn is rising. A dawn of true freedom. A dawn of progress led by your own hands, under the banner of those epic battles your forefathers fought. You are the sons and daughters of warriors and kings. Verse 2. Breaking the chains. People of the Confederation of Sahel States, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, you stand fearless. You stand sovereign. With your voices and with your courage, and yes, with your weapons if necessary, you will break every chain that still binds your nations. For too long, your gold, your uranium, your oil, your land, your wealth has been stolen. Now, you will reclaim it all. Let the spirit of Africa, rich, fertile, brilliant, shine once again in the world. Chorus. The new soldiers. We are all soldiers, not just those in uniform, but every farmer, every teacher, every mother, every youth. We are determined, we are resilient, we are united. Together, we will make the Confederation of Sahel States stand strong. One space, one people, one destiny. Verse 3. Building the future. People of the AES and all people of Africa, your tenacity is unmatched. With blood, with sweat, you are writing a new chapter of history today. Let your children be proud of their past. Proud of the African genius that built the pyramids, crossed the Sahara, mapped the stars. Let them forge the present, creating industries, building roads, writing new laws, defending their land. And let them build a better world, an Africa that stands tall among nations, free, respected, prosperous. Final chorus. A rallying cry. Soldiers, we are all soldiers. We will not bend. We will not break. We will not be divided. We march as one. One space. One people. One destiny. People of the AES. This is your moment. This is your anthem. This is your fight. Now rise and make history. For the people. For the land. For Africa. AES, forever united.
Tribute to the people of the Sahel, heirs of the great empire, perilous a new era, heralding freedom and progress under the banner of epic battles. People of the AS, fearless and sovereign by word and by break the chains that bind you, so that your riches may return to you. And the fertile spirits of Africa may sparkle. Soldiers, we are all determined, resilient and united, so that the AAS may remain one space, one people, one destiny. People of the AAS, people of Africa of tenacity, with blood and sweat you will write history, so that proud of their past, your children may forge the present and build a better world. Soldiers, we are all determined, resilient and united, so that the AAS remains one space, one people, one destiny.
Right. So, yeah. So I've paused the video on the Sahel anthem. Yes. Raspala, do you want to make any final comments, and then we'll move on to hear what others have to say? Yeah. Oh, Raspala is kind of dropped out. Okay, so let's open the floor now for contributions on the question of harmonizing economic policies. Does anyone want to speak? Brother John is really struggling with his internet. So we've got Sister Tapua, we've got Divine, Sister Chizomo, Brother Pigeon, Brother Shaza. So welcome. Does anyone want to say anything? Okay. In that case, I will share share on of why do we why do we need to harmonize our economic policies? Why? What is the case for African economic unity? Some would argue that the question is not why harmonize, but how can Africa afford not to harmonize? So first of all, we need to break the colonial economic chains. So colonialism, as you know, designed Africa's economies to serve foreign powers, exporting raw materials, importing finished goods. If we harmonize, we will dismantle this exploitation by eliminating trade barriers that keep African markets small and dependent. And then we will shift from raw exports to regional value chains. Example, processing cocoa in Ghana instead of Europe. So without harmonization, we remain trapped in a cycle of dependency. So this is why we need to harmonize economic policy. That's the first reason. Another reason one would argue is that we need harmonization to compete in a globalized world. Why? Because the world trades in blocks, the EU, Asian, and so on. But Africa, with 54 fragmented markets, I mean, think about it, 55, if you include Western Sahara. 54 fragmented markets. Now, you don't need to learn about economics to know that if I produce milk in Uganda and I want to export it to Ghana, and I have to tick certain boxes and so on, and my goods will be checked and so on, that will raise my costs. It will increase my business costs. So if I produce milk in Uganda and I want to export it to other African countries, it means that my costs are going to increase. So it doesn't take reading economics in university to realize that if you harmonize milk production and distribution across the continent, for instance, that you reduce business costs for those in that business. So one of the reasons for harmonizing economic policies is for competition, because the world trades in blocks. So a united African market, which some would argue is about 3.4 trillion GDP, means that we can leverage our demand. We can leverage demand and demand better deals from China, the EU, and the US. Because fragmented markets cannot get a good deal. If you want to buy something, for instance, and you buy it as in one big block, you get discounts and so on that you will not get if you all go individually to the seller to buy the same thing. So it's important that sometimes that you buy in blocks because you get better deals. The other reason is the single currency. Now, what a single currency means? It means that we have fewer exchange risks, which means that there's cheaper intra-African business. So a Kenyan company trading in Nigeria would not lose profits because they have to convert their sales in Naira into dollars and then exchange or change their dollars into the Kenyan currency. Now that, when you are doing that exchange, you lose money, you see, because the currencies are also, the exchange rates are not stable, they fluctuate. So what it means is that the current system means that our businesses are losing money because of exchange risks. So a single currency means that we have fewer exchange risks and therefore cheaper intra-African business. So that is the second reason why we need to harmonize economic policies, because it enables us to compete in a globalized world. And someone might think, well, why is this important? Well, think about it. If you are selling something in the Ghanaian market and that same thing can be brought into your country and priced cheaper, what do you think consumers will do? Consumers who don't have a lot of money, they are not highly paid, will buy the good that costs them less. So the current structure means that sometimes foreign goods in African markets are cheaper than African produced goods. Rice in sacks, 50 kilogram sacks or bags of rice produced, say, in Kenya or produced in Uganda or produced in Ghana, in the Ghanaian market, on the Ugandan market, that it costs more than the imported 50 kilograms rice from another country. And naturally, consumers will go for the cheaper option because they don't have a lot of money. So fragmentation is making Africa poor. Unity will make us powerful. So that is the second reason for harmonizing economic policies. So let me go back again. The first one is to break the colonial economic chains. The second one is that so we can compete in a globalized world. The third one is to end what some people call the resource curse. What is that? Africa loses 100 billion plus yearly, we are told. $100 billion. Now think about that. 100 billion annually, which means that in the last 25 years, Africa has lost 2,500 billion dollars. Think about that. Look at how many or how much resources we are losing. And how are we losing that? Through tax wars. Because Malawi wants multinationals to open shop in Malawi. Next door, Tanzania wants the same company to open its shop in Tanzania. Across to West Africa, the same Ghana wants the same multinational to open shop in Ghana. The same multinational is being lured or is being asked to come to Congo, and so on. So what do you think will happen? So it means that African countries are having tax wars because these multinationals will go to the country that gives them not even just zero tax rate, but negative tax rate, which means that we even build the infrastructure for them to exploit us. Now that's a negative tax rate, isn't it? Where you want them so much that you are even prepared to do things that means that your people standard of life will even be slashed down. The other way in which we lose these 100 billion plus is through illicit financial flows. Multinationals exploit weak tax coordination, and this includes bribing our leaders as well. The bribery and corruption is so vast on the continent, you won't believe it. And so they turn a blind eye. And so money flows out. Then the other one is duplication. 20 plus countries on the African continent. What do we all do? We're all importing fuel. Seriously? And then what our other countries do? They are exporting fuel. So we have African countries exporting fuel, and then we have African countries importing fuel. Come on, this is crazy. This is madness. So as a result, we are losing so much resources, which some have argued is about 100 billion. Now, that 100 billion is just a minimum. Just a minimum. It's more than that. So what we are saying is that policies. In other words, harmonized policies equals Africa keeps its wealth. And I think, our brothers and sisters, maybe this is an angle we need to start pushing, that if Africans are to be wealthy, they can only do that if Africa is united. Because if people ask us, well, why should we be united? We need to argue that we'll be united. If we are united, it means you will be wealthy. It means, for instance, that the 100 billion plus that Africa is losing, it will stay in Africa, which means that you will have better housing, we will have better schools, primary, secondary, higher education, colleges, sixth forms, and so on, and further education, universities, and so on. We'll also have research centers, and so on. So we'll have better education. Your children will have better education. Not only that, you and your children will have better health care if this money stays in Africa and doesn't fly out of the continent. So you have better health care. You have better housing. You can build a kind of houses that were so beautiful, it lured them there to Africa in the first place. You can build a new Africa. So maybe this wealth issue, and Africans enriching Africans is maybe the angle we need to push. Instead of instead of reducing poverty, we should leave the language of reducing poverty and move to the language of making Africans wealthy. Because if you are talking about how to reduce poverty, you're not telling people how they can be wealthy. Reducing poverty is not making you wealthy. So that's the third part, the third reason, and in the resource curse. So I've given you 3 reasons. Let me go back again to the beginning. 1, we need to harmonize because we need to break the colonial economic chains, eliminate trade barriers, shift from raw exports to regional value chains. The second was competing in a globalized world. And there are 2 dimensions to that which I mentioned. the United African Market, which is what the African Continental Free Trade Area is about. The second dimension is a single currency that will eliminate or reduce, means that there'll be fewer foreign exchange risks. The third, which I've just been talking about, is ending the resource curse, because we are losing 100 billion annually, at least, which means over the last 10 years, we have lost what? Almost, at least 1,000 billion. That's a lot of money, dollars from the continent. Now, the fourth reason is that if we harmonize economic policies, we will silence the guns with jobs. Economic exclusion is fueling instability. The Sahel crisis, there's xenophobic attacks, youth migration, our youth crossing the desert, where they die crossing the desert or they die in the Mediterranean. All this is because of the lack of opportunity. So if we harmonize our economic policies, it means there'll be free movement and harmonized job policies. Our youth will not be killed in South Africa because they go there to find jobs. They will not be shot, or they will not be lynched or whatever. They will not be killed because there's free movement and harmonized job policies. So Africans will work where labor is needed. So doctors can move across the continent to underserved regions. Then we'll have industrial hubs, manufacturing jobs to replace illegal migration. So that is the fourth reason why we need to harmonize economic policies. Because if we do, we will silence the guns with jobs. So let me remind us again. The first is to break the colonial economic chains. Second, because it enables us to compete in a globalized world. Third, ending the resource curse. Fourth, silencing the guns with jobs. A fifth reason is that it helps us to claim the 21st century. Today, we have the fourth industrial revolution. AI, renewables, digital finance. Now, these reward scale and speed. So the African continent has what it takes to scale up this whole AI, renewables, and digital finance in a way that other countries can't. And I don't know if you know, because some of us are so kind of caught up in the new colonial world that I am a Malawian, I am a Ghanaian, I am a Kenyan, I am a this, and we are proud that we are Malawians and Kenyans and Ghanaians and so on and so forth. That we are shocked when we come to the other side of the world and they see us all as one. And those in Africa don't realize that those outside Africa, they don't care about Nigeria, Ghana. They just see Africa as one. And Africans don't seem to get it, that the outside world sees Africa as one country. Don't you get it? They don't see the differences that you think is there. When they see a black man on the streets of London, you think they care whether he's from Kenya or Ghana or Nigeria or South Africa? They don't care. They don't care. All is an African. So Africans need to understand. So in other words, the argument for unity is not really very difficult because the outside world will accept it. They already think it is anyway. You understand? The outside already thinks you are one country. So uniting is not going to be anything new for the world. If we announce that Africa is united, well, they will say to you, but we thought you already united. Well, what was the problem? There's nothing revolutionary about that. We already thought you were one country anyway. So what's the big problem? What's the big issue here? What are you celebrating? So it looks like we are really behind. The African continent is behind global thinking in this sense. So I bring that in to make the point that it seems that the continent itself is not aware of its potential and how the world sees it. So a single digital market could birth Africa's own Alibaba or Tesla. If we have a digital market, we'll have our own Alibaba, our own Tesla. And then the Pan-African infrastructure, like a continental high-speed rail. So you can travel from Cape Town in Tanzania to Libya in half an hour. Now think about that. high-speed rail. Imagine traveling from Cape Town to the Libyan capital on the coast of the Mediterranean in half an hour, 1 hour, whatever. Yeah, can just imagine to the continent. You know, but the thing is that it will cut business costs. Now, guess what? China built its rise on unity. China is about the same population as Africa. One government for about 1.4 billion people, yeah, plus. That's China. Africa must do the same. China, the Chinese are not Caucasians. Yeah, they were called the yellow people. In fact, according to the West, by the West I mean Euro America. That's what I mean by the West here. They see China as their strategic competitor. That's how they see China. And the reason is that for them, Africa is already under their boots anyway. They have their feet firmly on Africa. So they don't have to worry about Africa because African men are asleep, most of them anyway. And some of them are part of the looting machine. And some of them are part of the Euro-American system. So they don't have to worry about, as you know, some of them serve in their military, like the General Langleys and so on. So they are black skinned, but they are not really interested in the wealth of Africa, whatever they say, So the final reason why we need to harmonize is that we can claim the 21st century. This century must be the African century. Are we going to go to another 100 years of this current situation? And then at the end of the 21st century, when the 22nd century comes, we are still talking about unification of Africa. Think about it. What would we have been doing for 100 years? Already 25 years is lost in the 100 years. 25 years is lost. 25 years is gone already out of the 100. So we're left with only 75 years. So are we going to be going on and on? And the 70 we did in 25 years, going to do the same thing. And then another 25 years is gone, and it's 50 years. I think Africa has got to be serious. So harmonization is not idealism. It's survival. As long as Nigeria, I mean Nigeria like a sleeping giant, really. Nigeria, it's a giant that is asleep. Somebody should wake it up. Anyway, so on a more serious note, Nigeria trades more with Europe than with Niger, which is just next door. DRC exports lithium raw, and then imports batteries. I talk about. Look, Africa needs visas. Africans need visas to work in Africa. I'm sorry. Africa needs visas to work in Africa. Africa. Anyway, so this is why we need to harmonize. Let me just summarize the argument. So we need to harmonize, one, to break colonial economic chains, so we can compete in a globalized world, so we can end the resource curse, silence the guns with jobs, claim the 21st century. And the bottom line is that our harmonization isn't idealism. it isn't idealism. We can have a situation where Nigeria is trading more with Europe than with Niger, and the DRC is exporting lithium rather than building, factories, battery factories on the continent. So our children can stop crossing the Sahara and die in the Mediterranean, and stop this nonsense of Africans getting visa to work in Africa. Africa. Anyway, so we remain colonized in all but name. So yes, so we are in a new colonial world. So in a way, we are still colonized. The choice is ours: balkanization or prosperity. Well, I know where I want. I want prosperity for me, for my African family, and for our children. That is what I want. And I want us to be wealthy as we used to be. Well, some of us, as we used to be wealthy. We are the people that exemplify nature. Nature is full of color. You look at the African people, you can see the color of nature. Every spectrum is with us. We are the mothers and fathers of the human race. And yes, it's true that people are raping their own mothers, impoverishing their own mothers, and so on. But we can do it. And so I've tried to lay out why we need to harmonize economic policies. The time is 8:30, and I'll stop there. So thank you very much for listening. Let's continue with the discussion. So yeah, Brother Pigeon, I see you're unmuted. Sure, you have something to say.
Thank you. Thank you, Brother Kwame. There's a question by Sister Chisomo Tapua. She's asking if political union should come before economic policy. What steps should we encourage, and how do we achieve this political union? Should economic harmonization happen simultaneously with political union?
Yeah, you see, Brother Pigeon, Sister, thank you so much for that question. You see, if you go back to the struggle for colonial freedom, and you realize that at the time we had no government of our own. We were dominated completely by the imperialists through colonialism. And the argument at the time was, and it was argued globally, by the way, and the world came to the conclusion, or the intellectual debate came to the conclusion that even the best form of colonial government, if you can find a colonial government that is so good, that is the best, that it cannot be better than self-government. That self-government is always better than colonial government. So that argument was made and won. Now, so intellectually, it created the ground for the liberation movements. And as you know, the wars helped that. And so in Manchester 1945, when our parents and grandparents went to Manchester 1945, with the Americans also coming, as you know, it was always the Americans that started off this, the Americans and the African Caribbeans. You know the history. It was they who started this Africa, this idea that Africa must be one. It wasn't Africans on the continent that were thinking like that. It was those from outside, our brothers and sisters who had been enslaved and who were free, that were thinking like that. At least as far as I know the history. So when we met in Manchester, the idea was to go back to the continent and fight for the liberation of your colonial territories. In fact, at the time, the argument was that West Africa as a whole should unite. And the fact that we have what we call today the West African Examinations Council, that different African countries don't have a separate examination council. All of us have one, which is based in Nigeria, as far as I understand it, was part of what it was meant to be, United West Africa. It was when Nkrumah was in government that he realized that even if we have a United West Africa, that will still not solve the problem. there will still be balkanization. So that's when Nkrumah started calling for continental unification. So the question, so we fought for political liberation because it was very simple. If you don't run the government, you cannot set policy. Policy is set by government. And if you are not the government, you can't set policy. So it means that Africans had to take control of the government. And Manchester laid the groundwork for that. Now, but the point of that was so that we will then implement economic policies that will favor us or that we want. So the question that sister is asking is, so now that we are all free, in inverted commas, although albeit neo-colonized, should we go for political unification? Which should come first, political unification or economic harmonization? Or some will go further and say not economic or harmonization, but economic liberation, because the political liberation was meant to set the ground for economic liberation. So the reason we are even talking about economic harmonization is because of the current reality, which is that now the previous colonial territories are now independent states, in law anyway, okay? And international law, by law I mean international law, they are independent states, sovereign independent states. So and the reason we are talking about harmonization is because of this reality. But ideally, Bra Dapijan, in fairness to the question, in reality, what we should be discussing is economic liberation, because that is the issue. We are not economically liberated. We are still selling our coffees, our lithium, and so on outside. We don't have a single currency into which we can trade, which means that we are not economically free. You see, so as things stand now, we are calling for harmonization. You see, but at the same time, we here in CSG anyway are calling for economic unification as well. And as things stand now, we both have to go. You see, we have to be calling for harmonization, but at the same time, we also have to be calling for political unification, because whatever harmonization can achieve, it cannot do what economic liberation would do. Because if we harmonize and we are still 54, 55 African countries, it still will not solve the problem. So however much we harmonize, that's fine, but we have to go beyond the harmonization to the political kingdom. So I hope that answers the question that the sister has asked. I haven't read it myself, but you've analyzed it. So sister, if you feel you want to add to that, please come back, Sister Poa. So if political union should come before economic policy, what steps should we encourage? Political union may not be able to. Political union, economic harmonization can come whether there's political union or not. Political unity is not necessary for the kind of policies we are discussing, which is economic harmonization. Yeah. But what political unity will do is that to then go to the next phase, which is economic liberation. I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Sister Chisomo?
Hello, thank you. Good evening. Yeah, this is an interesting one. And when you listen to the way Brother Kwame was putting it and actually laughing about it, it is laughable, it is funny how, as a huge continent as we are, have become one big joke. We can't manage ourselves, we can't speak to each other, we can't do the things together. The simplest of things that other people are doing, we don't seem to be, I don't know whether it's because the leaders are competing or the leaders don't like each other, or I've yet to figure that one out. Because on the ground as people, we seem to be unifying. That's why we're in this group today. as different from people from different countries. We are all in these WhatsApp groups discussing. But because we've got no power to implement what we're discussing, we're still stuck waiting for these guys. So, like I put in there, if it were a cartoon film, it would be a very, very funny one, because all these leaders running all over the place, looking for help. I don't know what help they're looking for. I don't know what solution they're looking for. And if we look at Ibrahim or the three countries, what they've done in a very short space of time, and other people couldn't do in 60 years. But in my observation or opinion, I would say the economic one is an easier one. We've seen Oriana and including the Sahel coming up with one flag, coming up with one. Is it the currency they're sorting out as well? Which means it's an easy one to do. So if the 55 or 54 countries come together and decide on a currency, that would solve a lot of things, because the poor countries will now be able to buy from the rich countries. It will be easier to transact. It will be easier to do so many things, because when you look at the problems the currencies are causing us, because we have to look at our own currency, then look at the currency next door, then look at the currency, international currencies, the dollar, the pound, the euro. It's just too much to deal with. And as far as the, I can't remember what the issue was about decolonization or colonizing. Before we deal with all that, we have to deal with things that people understand. And that's sorting out this little thing about the currency. People understand my currency is lower, that currency is good, that currency is. So if we unify this one, harmonize this one, the rest will just follow. And yeah, so yeah, that's my observation. I've forgotten the other one I was going to say. I might come back with it. But that would be my first one, really my first one, the one that everybody understands. And then with that might bring the leaders together, that might start the leaders talking together. I was listening to a video just this afternoon when Maponga is on one of these YouTube channels, when he says, if I was the leader, if given the opportunity, I'll just call all these leaders, put them together and have a meeting. Who has uranium? Who has gold? Who has whatever. So everybody knows who has whatever. And what do we do with all these resources that we've all got? You know, deal with it as a continent, than this little country, and then this little country. What's happening now, which is not bad, it's the beginning. There are so many cliques happening at the moment. So we've got the Sahel, and now we've got these three in the south coming together and discussing things. But it's the SADC. And in the SADC, certain countries are being left out in these discussions. I'm not sure if they feel these countries will not bring anything to the table, or whether these countries don't want to get involved and reach out to say, okay, can we be in this pact? But some movement is happening, but not maybe the ones being left out will finally say, okay, we want to start talking. I know Malawi doesn't talk to anyone, so they'd rather they're busy writing letters to Trump as to why they can't go to America and why they can't go to the UK. Because they've got all their money stashed out there, and they're thinking, how are we going to get it back? And Trump is trying to these guys to say, look, can you fix your stop coming here? So I don't know, but they come for me, because as far as I'm concerned, Africa is not poor. There's no poverty in Africa, none whatever. It's just made. So that can be fixed. So that's my contribution.
Thank you. Let me go to Sister Tapoa first before we come to Madam Kwame. And anybody who want to share their comments, please, let's take them one. Then we'll come to Brother Kwame as we come towards the end of this. Sister Tapo?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this discussion. I'm going to start with a very African statement, because I feel we are a bewitched people, because the colonialists really colonized us mentally to the point where we don't see how ridiculous we are. We respect the boundaries that were put for the purposes of serving the masters, and we're there maintaining those boundaries. Yes, we might not be able to momentarily turn and stop being Zimbabwean, but let's not make the Zimbabwean borders stop us from being a people, stop us from realizing our dream that we are one people. Unfortunately, I'm going to say, because we are acting like bewitched people with our heads in the sand. I was looking at the Chinese example, and I think when the Chinese named one of the centuries, the century of humiliation by the Japanese, they faced their reality. We as Africans should face our reality and call this past century our century of humiliation. Because once we do that, we then start to analyze why we were humiliated, how we were humiliated, and nobody wants to be humiliated. We're going to avoid, sending money back to Switzerland, so stealing from our own people, asking for visas from each other, pointing fingers at each other, because we are behaving to the beckoning of the colonial master. We must really come down and say, let's man up. I know someone's going to say man up. Yeah, but I mean it. Let's man up. Let's face it and say, this is total humiliation. What we must do as a people is being modeled to us by the Sahel. There's no time to negotiate and say, we need democracy, we need this. We need strong men to get us out of this hole. We need people who have the African spirit at heart. My position is, the next steps for us to do is to work at getting new leaders. We need new leaders. New leaders either in being born again into the likes of Traore, or new leaders, as in new, younger leaders who have got a different perspective, who might not be as colonized mentally as we are, who might just be suffering from the remnants of colonialism that we've been subjected to. Because at least they have hope. They did not live through what we've lived through. And we don't want to be passing on this bewitched mentality. That means we are crossing seas, we're dying, we're sacrificing ourselves for the sake of developing other continents because we don't feel humiliated when we are out there. And those people who are out there, who were forced out there, who were enslaved, are trying to come back home, and we are busy trying to run away from home. I think we need new leaders. We need a new Africa. And we need to really think that we've been humiliated. How are we going to get out of this humiliation? It's embarrassing, totally embarrassing. I mean, there's total confusion. When we're so wealthy,
I think I'll stop here for now. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Sister. Thank you, Sister Tapua. Is there anybody with any other concern before we go back to Brother Kwame? Any point to raise? Anybody? Then I'll go back to Brother Kwame straight. Okay. Sister Tapua is talking about leadership. And I think the need for a new leadership. I don't know. If you look at the average leadership age in Africa, I don't know new is young or new is different phase. I'm just reading here the president of Cameroon, who is 92 years old, still going for another term. So I really don't know what's going on in the continent. We have revolutionaries who came in as revolutionaries like Museveni, going for, I don't know, 39 years or 40 years in power. And we have so many others like now Kagame, still going for another almost 20 years in power. And you really wonder, where are we going? So I think the spot on Sister Tapua. Look at the new leadership that is coming up. For example, what you're saying, the Burkina or Niger. The people haven't stayed there for 10 years, but they're making a move towards where it's supposed to be. And you wonder, people have been here for 20, 30, 40, many years, and you just don't understand. But anyway, yeah, let me hear what Brother Kwame have to think, come about with this as we are almost going towards the end of this. Of course, Brother Kwame, as an economist, you know, some of us can talk on papers and on theory. They say we can theorize this, but you look at the practical steps towards the implementation. Yes.
Yeah, I think Sister Tapua has made a key point about new leadership. But I think because I am talking to you from England, I have to be careful what I say because there are laws in this country that forbid ageism. So I'm not allowed to say, for instance, that it's illegal to say that because somebody is young, that they can't be a good president. And you can't, by law, you can't say that because somebody is old, that they can't be a good president. So and that law, which is called the Equalities Act 2010, was passed in 2010 in this country, because a lot of people were facing, young people were facing backlash from capitalism, and so were the older ones. So this law was passed anyway. It's a long story. So what I would say is that we have to be mindful or careful how we frame this, because there is no scientific basis to say that just because somebody is young, they can be a president that works for the people, and vice versa. Just because somebody is old, and somebody being old doesn't mean that they have to be president. You can have a council of elders of a country where those who have lived long lives, have served in different roles, and have something to contribute to the country's development can advise, for instance. So in England, they have what we call the House of Lords. The House of Lords is not an elected chamber. They want it elected. But it does essentially what our Council of Elders do back home. So in our traditional authorities, in our traditional systems, we respect age, don't we? And so on. So I think at the end of it all, I agree that we need a new governance system, because what we have right now is a big joke. It's not democracy, is it? It's not democracy at all. As Fela Kuti said, it is the demonstration of craziness. Democracy, demonstration of craziness. That's what Fela said, and it is indeed. It is indeed crazy. Biya is Paul Biya, ruled for 34 years. He's 83. Zimbabwe, Sitafua, your country, Brother Robert, he was 91 when he was ousted in 2017. So, so I mean, there's a case to be made that, I mean, can you really be ruling a country when you are 91 or when you are 83? When there are younger people who are more energetic. They may not be they may not be cleverer or brighter. You know, you can be old and still be bright, yeah. But your faculties. Look, I'm not an expert in this area, so let me stop there. All I want to say is that the average age of African presidents are currently is 62 to 65 years, and then there are the outliers. You know, those who are very old, like quite old, and then there are the younger ones, and like Traore. Anyway, the time is 4 minutes to 9, and we've had a discussion on the harmonization of the African continent. So, if anybody has anything to say, let them say it, and then we can bring them into a conclusion. Yeah.
Brother Kwame, I wanna look at a bit as we even come to an end the various quotes by Nkrumah that he says that the first step towards our cohesive economy will be a unified monetary zone with initially an agreed common parity for our currency. When we find that arrangement of a fixed common parity is working successful, there will seem to be no reason for not instituting one common currency and one single bank of issue. But he went ahead and also said another quote here that I'd like to put on. He actually declared Africa must unite now. But look at how he's trying to bring this element on how he's approaching the need for us to have a common currency. Because that's very important. So that we can robustly and compete globally, we need to have some unity. Because we have seen, actually, as you're saying, we have seen this is over 60 years. 60 years. And it's not that what you're discussing is very new. It's what Nkrumah says those 60 years. And everybody who has come to president, I don't think there's any president who don't know who Nkrumah is or was, even if they are whatever the age they are. But 60 years of even a union called Africa Union or OAU, they don't need to look for a solution. The solution was proposed. Just a roadmap for implementation has never worked for 60 years.
They're asleep.
and now we are being told that maybe in 2063, there's something will work. In fact, I am against that because how are we going? No, I'm a strategist. So there's a way on how you monitor your strategy. So when you say 2063, because myself, I might be there, and maybe some people even talked of people sat down in that 2011 to come up with 2063. Some of them might not be there. Some of them might be there, or sometimes I might not also be there. But my generation will be asked, you said that 2063 will unite. Now, where is the unity? And I'll start saying, no, it was not me who sat down. Some people sat down and say we'll be uniting in 2063. So basically, I think it falls back to the leadership, Brother Kwame, because look at what Nkrumah proposed in 63. Look at what he proposed in 63. Talk about military. Talk about economic. Talk about, and he gave even reasons. He did not just propose. He gave the advantages and what should be done. But surely, 60 years. Are we bewitched? 60 years. That will be the end of it.
Yeah, Brother Pigeon, Satafua suggests that we use humor to spread the message. So look at what she said in the chat. In the meantime, Brother Pigeon, the topic for next week is that's the last Saturday of June, is industrial development. So make the final announcements and then we can bring the meeting to a close. I'll make the final remarks and then we'll bring the meeting to a close. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We will be looking at that industrial development, of course, whether we still have industries to develop, whether we are still also looking for a plan for development, and whether we are willing to develop Africa. But thank you for this conversation. Brother Kwame has actually, I think this is the first time Brother Kwame talked for more than 1 hour. It was a very interesting conversation. And I want to thank and believe that members who are listening, actually, the fact that they still stayed until this particular moment means that they were also in line with what you're speaking on. Because if you could be boring, some could have walked away long time ago. But want to thank everybody for actually finding time to be here. Sometimes we don't appreciate that even the cost of data just to sit online for 2 years is something very expensive. And that is the investment you're doing towards this conversation. And we thank you for that. We are looking forward to still have our usual Thursday conversation going on. We are in a very interesting space, ideology and a society. And in fact, I'll request members who don't join our Thursdays to please find time and join us so that you can also find how ideology shapes the society. The recordings from last week actually have been shared, and I'll request that we can share them more if you have time to do that. I share them with your friends so that they can have some time with it. Then yes, we are still looking forward to some other activities that will be coming. Of course, we still have intention of other classes or other programs we want to run, concepts of consciousness, we have a library running. We have so many things that are going on. But once again, thank you for this evening. Thank you for your time. And may we meet again on Tuesday on my Kiswahili class if you want to come for Swahili, on Thursday on our consciousness, or on next Saturday. Brother Kwame, back to you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Brothers and sisters, so Africa's economic freedom won't be given, it's built. So today's ideas that we've discussed are tomorrow's blueprint. Your mission is to push the African Continental Free Trade Area wherever you are, reject division in business and policy, invest in Pan-African solutions. Nkrumah's words ring true. We face forward. Let's march united. Forward ever. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Brother Kwame, you have the right to both end the meeting. I'll be stopping the meeting, the recording.